Chapter 73. Divine status, you say? Yes, it's divine status. What else could it be? Hearing the words of the dragonkin, Alone wore a perplexed expression. He had considered the concept of divine status before, recalling words spoken by supernatural beings in the past, but he had always dismissed the thought. The reason was simple: there was no logical basis for him to attain divine status. As Alone pondered this, he soon opened his mouth to ask a question. Then, why did you tell me to deal with the outer God? Your question is unclear. Didn't you say that I had to deal with the outer God before you would tell me anything? But from what I know, divine status cannot be obtained by killing a god. In the setting he knew, killing a god in psychedelia did not grant one divine status or allow for its absorption. In other words, killing the outer god in Latanya would not elevate one's status. Well, you're not wrong. A normal human cannot absorb divine status, even if they kill a god. It nodded affirmatively in response. Then why did you? However, just as Alone was about to express his confusion, it interrupted him. That only applies when the one who kills the god is an ordinary human. What? Perplexed by its next words, Alone asked again, and it seemed to be deep in thought before finally speaking. Let me ask you in return. Why do you think humans cannot obtain divine status even when they kill gods? It's because humans lack status. To put it in simpler terms, they don't have the right vessel. It continued. In contrast, if there is a vessel, a human can also contain divine status. A vessel, you say? When I say a vessel, it's not that profound. It's simply faith. Faith. It seemed to find the right word and then spoke. For mortals, faith is a more relatable term. So, if one has faith, even an ordinary human can gain divine status. Exactly. And you do have a faith. That's why I asked you to deal with that being. You have a small capacity to contain divine status. Is that a sufficient answer? It asked, resting its chin on its hand. Alone was still bewildered. I understand the words, but why do I have faith? Isn't it strange to ask me that question? True, but could you be mistaken? Impossible. You certainly possess divine status. If you didn't have the vessel or the status, you wouldn't even be able to look me in the eyes. I suppose that makes sense. Alone nodded at its words but remained somewhat doubtful. Is it because of my fame? Even by his own assessment, Alone had become quite well known in the United Kingdoms. He wasn't so famous that his mere face would be recognized, but his name would be. Still, fame was one thing, faith was another. That makes no sense. Why do I have faith? Alone frowned, deep in thought, but he soon set it aside, realizing it wasn't something he could resolve right away. Looks like there's something else I need to figure out. He then refocused on the fact that he had somehow gained divine status and asked another question. So, will I also gain powers? As he understood it, the gods of this world were granted powers, once acknowledged as gods. The abilities obtained through divine status were overwhelmingly powerful. So, with hopeful expectations, Alone looked at it and asked. Regrettably, your divine status isn't that significant. Are there ranks even among divine statuses? Isn't that obvious? To put it simply, your divine status is comparable to that of a local deity from a remote region with a population of fewer than 500. But I vanquished 2 outer gods. Even if you eliminated 2 of them, you can't absorb all of their status. And to be precise, you didn't destroy them completely, you only temporarily removed them. I see. With a brief sigh, Alone listened to the explanation. The dragonkin spoke with a hint of curiosity. Still, it is a bit peculiar. The reason you were able to subdue Ulthultus back then was likely because you had status. How could you have not known that you possessed it? Ah. Alone finally understood why he was able to capture Ulthultus just before it fully manifested and responded with a low exclamation. Even so. How strange. In fact, there are many things that can't occur without status, yet you remained unaware of it. The being seemed genuinely intrigued, murmuring something too soft for Alone to hear. I can't hear you well. Oh, it's nothing. Realizing something, the dragonkin deferred the matter to another time. Anyway, that's not what's important here. The important thing is that you've gained at least minimal status, allowing you to see the truth. It shrugged. Let's continue the Q&A. What else do you want to know? With this prompt, Alone moved on to his next question. Starting with the concept of status, Alone asked the being about faith and other questions he had compiled. He had many questions at the moment. Unfortunately, among all these questions, there was only one for which Alone received a clear answer. The term for the lost grey god's beastkin and the mage referred to as Omadosa. That was it, he obtained no other information. If you're not able to answer this much, was there any point in me gaining status? Alone spoke in a slightly exasperated tone, but the being merely shrugged. Don't be too discouraged. It's not that I don't want to answer. Then why aren't you explaining anything? Why not talk about the true name, the successor of Will, or even the reason why Ulfalta sent me here? Alone listed the questions he had prepared, and the being responded. There are 2 reasons. Let's hear them. First, all your questions are essentially about the same topic. In other words, the questions will be answered once you see the truth. Once I see. Now that you possess status, you will be able to see. But you'll need to go to the abyss. So, instead of answering here, I need to go to the abyss. Yes, once you look into the truth there, you will understand everything you've asked. Your efforts have not been in vain. Without status, one doesn't even have the right to see the truth, it continued. Alone looked at the being and responded. Is that why you're not giving me answers? Because I'll understand everything once I see it. No, it's not because I'm lazy or unwilling to share information. Then? At Alone's question, the being fell silent for a moment before letting out a small sigh. Because they are watching. They are. Yes, those entities that lurked in the pitch-black darkness, gnawing at the roots of history and pushing the past into the abyss, those that once brought about the fall of the gods' era. The Dragonkin clicked his tongue briefly and added, will rise again. This is why I cannot speak directly about the past. Alone stared intently at the being. Even though its face was simply marked by black and white distinctions of eyes, nose, and mouth, Alone could tell that it was telling the truth. How do I get to this abyss you mentioned? In response, the being handed Alone a necklace with a black tree symbol, as if it had been waiting for the question. This is? Take it to the last remaining mermaid on the eastern shore. She will naturally guide you there. Hearing this, Alone quietly examined the necklace and then nodded. The eastern shore was, in any case, the location of Raxas, where he intended to go after this meeting. I'll go then. You've made a wise decision. Just as Alone was about to turn away, he remembered something and turned back. What is it? There's one more question I haven't asked yet. Ask away. If it's something I can answer, I will. Ulfalta said I was recognized by the black one and the blue one. Can you explain what that means? Alone's question made the being pause for a moment before replying with a curious look. After a brief silence, it seemed to realize something and grinned. Oh, I see. Just think of it as recognition from a mighty god. And with that explanation, the conversation seemed to conclude. By the way, if you're interested, I can enhance Sparrow's staff for you. But you'd only be able to receive it in about 2 years. 2 years? Why? It'll take that long to make it useful and for me to regain enough strength to have a proper conversation again. Is that so? Indeed. Right afterward, the Sparrow's staff, which had been silent until now, spoke in a pitiful voice. I actually enjoy being by Alone's side. Wouldn't it be better if I could assist a bit more? Though its eyes weren't visible, its plea was filled with sincerity. Alone glanced at the staff. I'll allow it. Eh? Wait, Alone? No, Count? Hello? As Alone finally set the staff down and turned to leave, the being called out again. Wait, I have one more thing to tell you. Something else? Yes, it's about your magic. Listen to this before you go, it won't take long. And with that, the being continued its explanation. After hearing the full story from the Dragonkin, Alone rejoined Sealrang, who had been waiting for a long time, and returned to the colony. The next day, he began preparations to head to Raxas. In truth, there wasn't much to prepare. Since he planned to move with a caravan departing today, all he needed was food and a few emergency supplies. Soon enough, he was ready, but unexpectedly, Yusha came to visit upon hearing that Alone was leaving the colony. What surprised him even more was the presence of King Carmax's 3 of the colony himself, accompanied by soldiers, to see Alone off at the north gate. Your Majesty, what brings you here? I wanted to see you off. the king of the colony, Carmaxes III, had come personally to greet Alone. "Anne, what is this? I was told it's a gift from His Majesty." "A gift for me?" "Yes. Isn't that right, Your Majesty?" 2 carts loaded with gold and jewels were waiting there. "Yes, that's correct. It's a gift from me." Alone looked at Carmaxes, who responded to Yusha with a broader smile than ever. Alone, finding it a bit excessive, expressed his surprise. "This is a bit too much, though." Alone wasn't one to refuse money. In fact, he believed the more money, the better. The sight of carts piled high with treasures made his jaw drop. However, it was clearly too extravagant a gift for him to accept. It seemed excessive for a mere token of favor, especially given that the giver was royalty, suggesting some political motive he couldn't grasp. He subtly declined the king's offer. "Ha ha, don't overthink it. Just accept it comfortably. But still, this is. Don't worry. It's purely given out of affection for you, with no strings attached. I'd really like you to accept it. Really, truly accept it." Seeing Carmaxes speak with such a strangely desperate expression, Alone couldn't help but nod awkwardly. And so, on that day, Alone took part in the journey, accompanied by 2 carts filled with gold and jewels. As Alone departed, a small smile appeared on Yusha's lips. And then, "I'm glad to see that the negotiations seem to be moving in a positive direction." Indeed. As Carmaxes met Yusha's red eyes, he was reminded once again of what he had realized the day before. No matter what happens, the Count of Palacio must not be provoked. How exhausting. In front of Carmaxes' eyes, the phantom of the magic herb he had quit 13 years ago seemed to shimmer. Chapter 74. About a week and 5 days had passed since leaving the colony. "Then, I look forward to seeing you again next time, Count." Indeed. Leaving behind the head merchant, who bowed deeply with a folder-like gesture, Alone decided to return to the Palacio Count's estate first. This was because he couldn't take the treasure wagon he received from the colony along on the upcoming journey. So, he headed back to the Count's estate, stored both wagons, and immediately set off toward Lartania. If the path to Lartania had been entirely opposite to the route to Raxas, he would have proceeded to his destination without hesitation. Fortunately, Lartania lay along the way to Raxas. Even though it wasn't the shortest detour, he was willing to endure it and set off on another journey. 5 days later. "Count." As Alone blankly gazed at the leisurely forest, Evan, who was driving the wagon, suddenly asked a question. "What is it?" "It's nothing special, but you seem to have something on your mind lately." "Does it look that way?" "Yes, you've been lost in thought quite often recently, haven't you?" Alone remained silent for a moment before responding to Evan's remark. "Seems like it. Is it because of what you mentioned before? That you had something to think about?" At Evan's words, Alone thought, that's part of it, yes. However, what had been preoccupying Alone's thoughts lately was not related to faith. Of course, he was curious about why he suddenly possessed the capacity to harness power. But there simply wasn't enough information to ponder or deduce anything alone. Currently, Alone's focus was not on faith but rather on the last words spoken by the Dragonkin. 2 possibilities. He recalled the Dragonkin's discussion about magic at that time. As you know, a mage's magic fundamentally requires imagination to be used. This is an unchanging law and truth, as certain and natural as the sun rising and setting. Yet, you seem to ignore it effortlessly. Alone remembered the Dragonkin extending its sharp, unusual index and middle fingers, different from those of humans. The law is immutable. It cannot be changed and must not be changed. Thus, I think you fall into one of 2 possibilities. One is that you, standing here before me, are an existence beyond my imagination. And the other is that you simply don't remember. Recalling the Dragonkin's farewell words, Alone clicked his tongue. No matter how I think about it, neither seems right. Obviously, Alone wasn't some inhuman being. If he were, as the Dragonkin suggested, he wouldn't be struggling like this in the first place. Yet, the second suggestion regarding a memory didn't resonate with Alone either. He had never lived during the Age of Forgotten Gods, when mags were known to exist. Even in the game, the Age of Forgotten Gods was merely part of the lore, while Babylonian phrases and beast folk were merely means to enhance magic attack power, never fully explored. In other words, Alone had learned even a bit about imagination only through his conversation with the Dragonkin. As a result, when Alone initially asked the Dragonkin if there were any other possibilities, the Dragonkin firmly stated that there were no other options beyond the two mentioned. Why is it that as time passes, I learn more about things I didn't know rather than uncovering hidden truths? Alone sighed briefly but then shrugged. According to the Dragonkin, when he eventually reached Raxus, he would finally see the truth of this world. Of course, to him, seeing the world's truth was less important than predicting whether this truth would bring danger to the world. After all, his ultimate goal, both then and now, was to lead a peaceful life. A peaceful life? Evan, hearing Alone's quiet mutter amidst the sound of rolling wheels, spoke up. Do you wish to live a peaceful life? Indeed. For someone who says that, your life doesn't seem very peaceful. I'm just a bit busy at the moment. I don't think things will be any different in a few years. Alone didn't respond. Deep down, he knew Evan's words weren't entirely off the mark. Evan. Yes? For dinner tonight, just eat some sweet potatoes. What? But thinking and saying are two different things, so Alone, revealing a small hint of annoyance, looked outside the wagon. Contrary to Alone's state of mind, the scenery outside was as peaceful as ever. It was a late sunset kind of day. A few more days later, upon arriving in Lartania, Alone decided to stop by a nearby shop to buy a suitable gift before heading to Murd. He didn't expect to get the artifact appraisal for free, but he believed it was only polite to bring a gift or two when visiting someone's home. Additionally, he regretted not having brought a gift the last time he rushed out to handle an outer god. Recalling the worn-out fountain pen in Ryan's office, Alone stopped by a shop to buy one. While searching for something that wasn't too extravagant but also didn't look cheap, he overheard some rumors. Have you heard? Heard what? One of the triumvirate has died again. I heard about that too. You mean Evima, right? Yeah, that's the one. Considering the bribes he pocketed, he kind of deserved it. But with Reet, another member of the triumvirate, dead as well. Only Ryan is left. That's why there's such an uproar. Why is that? I heard this from somewhere, but the rumor is that she killed all the members of the triumvirate. Why? How did such a rumor start? It's not entirely clear, but they say they had a confrontation recently. Apparently, someone insulted her godfather. It was a rather unsettling rumor. Deus Macallion, known as the second sword among Caliban's 5 swords, was incredibly famous within the country. Although unofficial and unrecorded, the fact that he had already defeated Reinhard was widely known throughout Caliban. Despite his glowing reputation and overwhelming charisma, there were whispers in the background about his suspicious fondness for magic, even though he was a master knight. Some even claimed that, during his knightly sword training, he would sometimes assume peculiar stances and mimic casting spells when no one was watching. Nevertheless, Deus Macallion's fame was so overwhelming that such strange rumors could hardly diminish it. However, not everyone viewed this situation favorably. One of these skeptics was the Prince of Caliban. Prince Tyrion, the second Prince of Caliban and the son of King Parmerion IV, was not pleased with the current situation. This was mainly because of his bad blood with Deus Macallion. Of course, this strained relationship was entirely his own doing. Unlike the first prince, who was deemed suitable for the throne, Tyrion was known as the palace's troublemaker. In the past, he had tried to approach Deus Macallion's only sister with crude, indecent remarks. As a result, he was humiliated in a duel, sanctioned by the king, where he was severely beaten. This incident left Tyrion with deep resentment toward Deus. TSK. Despite his reluctance to think about Deus, Tyrion's thoughts turned to him today because of a secretive request he had received. The request was to apply political pressure on Count Palacio. Fulfilling the request was not particularly challenging, in fact, it was something Tyrion had to do. Despite his notorious behavior, Tyrion was able to maintain his faction, largely thanks to the item provided by the person who made the request. Moreover, the request itself wasn't particularly difficult. Applying political pressure on Count Palacio without cause was risky for Tyrion. After all, Count Palacio was a noble of the Asturian kingdom, not of Caliban. Even though Caliban and Asteria were united under a confederation, it was still a delicate matter to interfere with another nation's nobility in this manner. However, there was one reason why Tyrion considered it easy to pressure Count Palacio. The person who sent the letter provided reasonable information that would make it seem natural for the second prince of Caliban to exert such pressure. In other words, Tyrion could apply pressure on Count Palacio without significant risk. Furthermore, by doing so, he could put the sender of the letter in a position of slight indebtedness to him. The real problem was the close relationship between Count Palacio and Deus Macallion. To be more precise, it was troubling that Deus Macallion seemed to be unusually fond of Count Palacio. HMPH. Tyrion knew that during the Five Swords meetings, whenever the topic of mags came up, Deus would soon begin talking about Count Palacio's greatness for nearly an hour. Tyrion was aware of this because he regularly received reports from one of the swords allied with his faction. Recently, Deus had even been abruptly praising Count Palacio, saying things like, "Why does Count Palacio always come to mind?" This left Tyrion in a dilemma. Opposing Count Palacio was insignificant compared to the potential benefits. For Tyrion, who despised Deus, it was the perfect opportunity to undermine someone Deus adored. Yet, Tyrion hesitated. He was unsure what Deus Macallion might do once he learned of this move. Despite his fame, Deus was like a mad dog. After pondering for a while, Tyrion finally made a decision. No matter how crazy he is, he can't possibly act. A sly grin spread across Tyrion's face. The only reason Deus Macallion had been able to beat and humiliate him before was that he had just cause. Without just cause, even a mad dog like Deus Macallion wouldn't be able to touch him. Despite his reduced influence and diminished trust from the current king, Tyrion was still Caliban's second prince. To harm him without any justification would be nothing short of madness, and Deus knew that as well. So, Tyrion was convinced that Deus wouldn't dare make a move. At least, until the day before. Boom! With a blank expression, Tyrion stared ahead. The door to the office of the palace annex where he was staying had been shattered, and a man stood there. Holding a wooden sword in one hand, the man was none other than Deus Macallion. "The sword of Caliban greets the successor of the Five Swords," he said, his eyes burning with fierce intensity. "I've come to ask you something." He had come for Tyrion. Chapter 75. Tyrion looked at Deus in disbelief. He had shattered the office door of the detached palace and strode in without hesitation, looking like a madman to anyone who saw him. Tyrion tried to speak immediately, but he soon realized that it was pointless. The knights, who should have always been on standby for him, were lying collapsed in front of the broken door. Aghast, Tyrion looked at Deus Macallion with an expression that conveyed his confusion. "What in the world are you doing?" "I merely came to ask something." "Ask what?" "I heard you are framing Count Palacio. Is that true?" Deus asked with a cold, piercing gaze, and Tyrion momentarily fell silent. What a murderous aura! No matter how unruly he may be, he's still a knight. But this aura from Deus wasn't something he was deliberately exuding, it was simply a natural part of him, Tyrion realized, his face reflecting both surprise and a slight frown. "So, what is it?" "I would like you to retract your decision." At Deus' words, Tyrion stared into his eyes. "Huh?" He let out a hollow laugh. "Why should I do that?" Deus continued to gaze at Tyrion intently. The subtle pressure of his killing intent weighed on Tyrion, who soon grasped the situation and twisted his lips in disdain, as if thinking, "What nonsense is this? Are you threatening me right now?" "I mean it literally. I have no intention of inciting a rebellion or making threats. I merely what? Wanted to inform you that the successor might die due to the architectural issues of this detached palace." The words, "That's a threat, you bastard," rose to Tyrion's throat, but he couldn't bring himself to say them. Deus's eyes clearly belonged to someone speaking the truth. This guy is serious. As cold sweat trickled down his back, Deus spoke again. "So, can you reconsider your decision? And if I don't?" Thinking Deus wouldn't dare do anything so absurd, Tyrion spoke, but upon hearing his response, Deus simply murmured, "Is that so?" as if regretting something. He then casually swung his hand. Crack! A purple line extended across the entire detached palace. Soon, as the intertwined lines spread like a spider's web throughout the palace. Creak tilde! An ominous sound that should never be heard in such a grand palace began to echo. The crack on the 8th pillar, which has been there for 18 years, suddenly gave way under the impact and collapsed. A voice, as if reading from a textbook, rang out. Deus, looking at Tyrion with a deeply regretful expression, prepared to clench his fist as if signaling that negotiations were over. Wait a moment. What's wrong? I retract it, I will retract it. At Tyrion's urgent shout, the once trembling royal palace suddenly fell silent, as if nothing had happened. It seems there's not much of an issue after all, Hearing these words, Tyrion, who had an expression that seemed to say, "What kind of madman is this?" let out a heavy sigh. If I can just survive this situation somehow, he thought secretly to himself. However, Deus, reverting to his usual indifferent expression, spoke up. Then, we'll need to align our stories. What? The reason I had to enter the palace so violently is because the heir harassed my younger sister. Tyrion's jaw dropped at those words, as if he couldn't believe it. Fine, let's go with that, he eventually agreed with a nod. After all, he had no intention of giving in to Deus's demands from the start. Once I get through this, I'll find a way to deal with him, he thought to himself, already plotting to use the situation to his advantage and bring Deus down once he left. A sly smile crept onto his face, but Deus continued. Oh, and just to clarify, if you're thinking of any other ideas, you might want to reconsider. Unfortunately, Tyrion's vicious plan was cut short by Deus's next words. Unless, of course, you want the rumor about the heir's deep involvement with foreign underworld organizations to spread. How do you know? It was a devastating blow. For Tyrion, who still coveted the throne, it was a story that could never reach the royal palace, let alone the king's ears. And with that, Deus concluded. I trust you'll make the right choice. Having said everything he intended to say, Deus turned and left the palace. Tyrion, left alone, stared blankly at the exit. Arrah! In a fit of rage, he grabbed his office chair and smashed it against the wall. About a day later, a rumor spread throughout the royal palace. The scoundrel prince had harassed Deus McCallion's younger sister. Meanwhile, in Caliban, Alone managed to meet Rhine in Merd without the difficulties of his previous visit and was finally able to get the insignia appraised, which had been his original goal. Here it is, Godfather. Thank you. I should be the one thanking you, Godfather. Seeing you happy makes me happy as well. Receiving the insignia from Rhine, Alone noticed her lightly fiddling with a fountain pen, her lips curling into a slight smile, and he nodded in satisfaction. I should have brought it sooner if I knew she'd be this pleased. Seeing Rhine's subtle smile, Alone thought to himself. Is it just me, or is her expression a bit more lively than before? Perhaps it was due to her unusually good mood, but the emotions on her face were more apparent than they had been during his last visit. The thought was fleeting, though, as Alone recalled something he had heard earlier. However, he soon shrugged it off. There's no way Rhine would do such a thing. At least, from his perspective, Rhine didn't seem like someone who would kill over mere insults. That's not possible, right? Suddenly, Alone thought of the son of the Lord of Lartania. Some time passed, and Alone stood up. Then, let's wrap things up a bit earlier today. You're leaving already, Godfather. Yes, I have some business that requires me to move quickly. Confirming that the sun was still high in the sky, Alone decided to part ways with Rhine earlier than usual. With the insignia appraisal complete, he had no more reason to stay in Lartania. As he prepared to leave, Alone suddenly uttered, "Ah. What's wrong, Godfather? Is it possible to get an artifact like this?" After he explained what he needed, Rhine pondered for a moment and then nodded. Yes, I should be able to get that type of artifact right away. Shall I get it for you? Please do. She moved quickly and returned shortly with a box containing the artifact he had requested. Here it is, Godfather. Thank you. How much do I owe you? No need to pay. It wasn't that expensive to begin with. Please consider it a gift. Hearing her words, Alone paused briefly before nodding in understanding. Then I'll gratefully accept it. Yes, Godfather. If you ever need anything else, please let me know anytime. Thank you for your consideration. With that final exchange, Alone wrapped up his brief stay in Lartania and set off once again. And, watching Alone's carriage gradually disappear into the distance, Rhine turned to look at the Lord's castle of Lartania beyond. Not much time left. She muttered quietly. It was the 5th day since leaving Lartania. With only about a day's travel left to reach the port city of Raxus. The sea. It's the sea. The sea came into view outside the window. As the ocean gradually appeared beyond the forest, Alone gazed blankly at the scenery. Stop! A man suddenly stepped in front of the carriage. Wearing a pointed hat, the symbol of a wizard, a blue-haired boy with an exceedingly arrogant expression spoke to Evan. You there, hand over some food. Evan was baffled by the boy who had abruptly appeared in the middle of the forest and started speaking informally. Perhaps the boy found Evan's confused expression displeasing. "Can't you hear me?" The boy furrowed his brows and raised his voice even more. Hearing the commotion outside, Alone stuck his head out of the window to see the boy blocking the carriage. "Oh, are you the master here? I was having trouble communicating with the servant, but this is perfect. Can you spare some food?" The boy made his request for food as if it were the most natural thing in the world, his face brightening. Alone was briefly taken aback by the audacity, but soon asked, "Who are you?" With an exaggerated hymn, the boy made a smug expression and declared, "I am Felin, a third-rank wizard affiliated with the Tower of the Blue Wizard." He introduced himself in a highly dramatic tone. Alone's jaw dropped at Felin's self-satisfied attitude, which only made Felin act even bolder. You probably know that receiving a favor from a wizard is a rare opportunity. And now, that precious opportunity has come to you. Is that so? Indeed. Though it may be immodest to say, I am undeniably a genius, even if not on the same level as my elder sister. So you should buy my favor with food. Felin declared boldly. As Alone pondered what to do with this kid. "Hey, Felin! I told you not to rush off on your own." A familiar voice called out from the nearby bushes. Though Alone hadn't heard it in quite some time, he instantly recognized its owner. Turning toward the bushes, Alone saw Penia emerge. "Are you seriously going to keep acting on your own? I swear, I'll beat some sense into you," she shouted at Felin in frustration. But when she spotted Alone's face sticking out of the carriage window. "Who?" Her body instantly froze. "Elder sister, don't worry. We'll get some food now." Felin, oblivious to the situation, started to speak again. Crack! Gah! Penia's eyes widened as she swung her staff at Felin's head with lightning speed. Felin collapsed face first into the ground. Then, "I am so sorry." Penia fell to the ground, bowing deeply in apology. Alone and Evan could only stare in stunned silence. Chapter 76. Felin Chrisin is a genius. Even at a young age, he had already reached the third tier, a level of talent recognized without dispute by any magician. However, unfortunately, Felin Chrisin's name isn't well known. This is because Felin Chrisin's talent could not match that of his sister, Penia Chrisin. In other words, his brilliance was overshadowed by the even greater talent of his sister. Nevertheless, Felin did not resent Penia. Instead, he admired her. She effortlessly performed magic that he could not easily achieve. Seeing Penia already recognized as the Vice Tower Master of the Blue Tower at such a young age, Felin even felt a sense of pride. He was proud to be of the same lineage as Penia Chrisin. Proud that Penia Chrisin, who had become the Vice Tower Master at a young age, was his sister. And so, to someone like him. It's been a while. Yes, it's been a while. How have you been? Yes, of course. The situation that was unfolding before him was beyond surreal, it was utterly shocking. So, what brings you here? Oh, well, it's because the Tower Master mentioned there was something to do in Raxa's Tilda. Felin stood agape as he watched Penia awkwardly smile, something completely out of character for her, who typically behaved arrogantly with everyone except the Tower Master. He had never seen Penia act that way toward anyone. What? What doesn't make sense? Evan, who was sitting in the carriage, asked as Felin muttered to himself. However, Felin remained in shock, as if he couldn't hear a thing. My sister, can she even speak formally like that? It was as if he had witnessed his proud sister compromising with the world, leaving him with a blank expression. But then, just yesterday, she slapped a noble heir 3 times and froze him with ice magic for being insolent, didn't she? And a few days ago, when a merchant group tried to scam her, she destroyed all their carriages, froze the guards who came later, and even stormed the Lord's castle to make a scene, didn't she? As Felin continued to recount Penia's outrageous behavior, Evan thought to himself. As expected, there are many crazy wizards. Admiring his troublemaking sister, or being that troublemaking sister, Felin and Penia were both equally bewildering. As Evan was once again updating his prejudices against wizards after hearing this wild story. So, that guy is your brother? Yes. I am truly sorry. He has been holed up in the tower all his life, so he knows nothing about the world. At this response, Alone calmly replied to the bowing Penia. There's no need to bow like that. It seems like he simply didn't know, so I understand. Thank you. Penia bowed again and sighed in relief. Sister, why on earth are you speaking so formally? Just as Phelan, who had been looking disheartened, finally managed to speak up, his words were cut short. Shut up! Smack! Before he could even finish his sentence, Penia began to mercilessly strike him with her staff. For a moment, there was silence. I'm sorry. Huh? The kid is still very young. As Penia approached and apologized again, leaving behind the flinching Phelan, Alone was reminded that she was sometimes portrayed as a bit of a morally corrupt character in the game settings. No, it's fine. Besides, if you're heading to Roxas, our destination is the same, so let's go together. Ooh? No, there's no need for that. Do you not want to? No? It's not that, it's just, Penia, who had been violently thrashing Phelan with her staff like a demon just a moment ago, began darting her eyes around, gauging the situation. It was as if a mouse trapped in front of a cat was trying desperately to find a way to escape. If you really don't want to, we don't have to go together. No, it's just... Alone was simply trying to be courteous, but Penia suddenly shuddered and murmured as if the thought gave her chills. I'll go. Is that so? You really don't have to if you'd rather not. Alone confirmed again, seeing Penia's less than thrilled expression. No. Please, let me join you. Unlike before, when she hesitated about accompanying them, Penia now seemed determined to make it clear that she wanted to go. Her slightly desperate face gave off the feeling of having been coerced, leaving Alone with a strange sense of guilt. All right, then. Let's go. With Phelan, still trembling, in tow, Alone set off toward Roxas, during which Penia shared two stories. First, about why the two of them had been foraging for food in the middle of the road. It seemed they had a major fallout with the merchant they were traveling with. According to Penia, after a minor argument, she made a small mistake, causing them to flee. He wondered why a minor mistake led them to flee without even securing food, but he chose not to pry further. More importantly, Evan and Phelan were looking at Penia with different, subtle expressions, giving Alone a rough idea of the situation, so he naturally changed the topic. During that time, he learned something else interesting from her. Ships are disappearing. Technically, it only happens near the ruinous coast, but they say ships are being pulled underwater. Is it a disaster? No, according to the treasure hunters, it seems to be a merfolk. Merfolk? Yes. Of course, it's not certain. Merfolk haven't been seen for a long time. Alone paused at Penia's words. Why are merfolk appearing now? He knew that merfolk were part of psychedelia. However, the timing was odd. At this point, the existence of merfolk hadn't yet been revealed. While the presence of two outer gods had already appeared, making the timing of their emergence somewhat meaningless, the appearance of merfolk still seemed rather premature based on the game's basic settings. Alone tilted his head slightly in confusion. No, a merfolk shouldn't be appearing at this point. Unlike the other outer gods, whose appearance was more abstract, the merfolk had a unique set of conditions that dictated their emergence, which made Alone uneasy. If merfolk had indeed appeared now, it also meant that other outer gods could potentially appear sooner than expected. Given this concern, Alone pondered until... We've arrived. Evan's voice snapped him back to reality. Even if merfolk were appearing, Alone still needed to proceed to Roxas. With that in mind, he stepped into the Kimin territory, which was part of Roxas's domain, and immediately left the carriage to head toward the harbor. This was because taking a ship was the only way to enter the capital of Roxas. The four of them soon arrived at the harbor and, fortunately, found a ship preparing to depart. However, there was a problem. It's 100 gold coins per person. The man who seemed to be the captain sneered blatantly, clearly intending to scam Alone and Penia. Ooh? 100 gold coins per person? Yes. Do you really think that's reasonable? If you don't think so, you can wait for the regular ship in 2 weeks. The captain grinned. Even though he had a vague sense that Alone was a noble and knew Penia and Phelan were magicians, he was brazen enough to attempt to swindle them. Do you know who I am? Penia spoke menacingly, even releasing some of her magic power, but the man merely flinched slightly and continued. Whoever you are is none of my business. Whether you're nobles or magicians, this is my ship. I decide the usage fee. The man spoke confidently. Seeing this, Alone surmised the likely reason for the captain's audacity. He must have connections higher up. The only way he could speak so boldly before nobles was if he had protection from someone powerful enough to cover up such a scam. After a moment's thought, Alone asked, "So, will you board or not?" The captain spoke arrogantly. Gazing at the arrogant captain, Alone finally spoke. "So, 400 gold coins." "Yes. I'll pay it." The captain's face momentarily twisted in confusion. Perhaps he hadn't expected Alone to accept the offer so readily, and he was stunned for a moment. "Take it." When Alone handed over the money pouch, the captain accepted it. Though still appearing somewhat skeptical, the captain wore a beaming smile and gestured toward the ship. "Get on. I'll take you there." The captain, with a sleazy grin under his thick beard, led the way onto the ship. "Wait, Count, are you really going to pay that? Even considering a high cost, that's nearly 10 times the usual price." Evan asked, shocked at the unexpected situation. There's no other choice. As long as the captain had connections to higher-ups, there was no way around it. Even if they managed to haggle the price down, they'd still have to pay a significant amount, or else they'd have to wait 2 weeks to reach Raxas, so paying the full amount was the only option. Honestly, it was an extravagant expense that he wouldn't have considered before, but thanks to the treasures he received from the king of the colony, his pockets were rather full. Maybe I should have let Pina and Phelan pay for it since they're loaded. Of course, even with full pockets, that thought did cross his mind. In any case, Alone and his party paid the fee and boarded the merchant ship bound for Raxas. On the first day of the voyage to Raxas, Alone rested in a room assigned by the captain, knowing that they were expected to arrive in the city in 3 days. Ugh! He glanced over at Evan, who was lying on the bed with a sickly green face, groaning. "Are you all right?" Alone asked. "I feel like I'm dying, Count. I'd rather just die." Ugh! Watching Evan, who had already dashed to the side of the ship over 5 times since waking up, Alone realized that Evan was prone to seasickness. And then, there was Pina. Much like Evan, Pina's face had turned pale, and she too looked dizzy. Not long after, she clutched her mouth and rushed off in urgency, just like Evan had earlier. So, even a 6th-tier magician can't handle seasickness, huh? Seeing Pina in a practically lifeless state, unable to move a finger like Evan, Alone let out a sigh of relief. "I'm lucky I don't get seasick." It was one of the few moments Alone felt a positive sentiment toward his body, which had a pitifully small mana pool. How long had it been since he thought positively about his own physique? Ding, 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 ding tilde. The ocean that had only produced the sound of waves and the creaking of rusty metal suddenly echoed with the sound of bells. Enemy attack! Pirates! In an instant, the merchant ship became chaotic. Feeling the commotion, Alone moved quickly and stepped outside to assess the situation. Pirates were swarming the deck, leaving no time to react. Alone immediately prepared to activate his freezing magic, flexing his fingers clad in magic armor, but then hesitated. If he cast the wrong spell and destroyed the ship, the situation could turn perilous. Realizing that a broken ship meant certain drowning with no alternatives, Alone decided to let himself be captured by the pirates for now. In the end, Alone was captured by the pirates. Pina, who couldn't overcome her seasickness, was slumped against the ship's railing and fell unconscious, unable to resist. She was caught without a fight, and her staff was confiscated. Evan and Phelan suffered the same fate. And in this situation? Let's make a deal. You can take all the goods, and I even have something you might like, some magicians and nobles. Over there, over there. That one's quite a wealthy noble. You could definitely get a high ransom for him. The captain, who was captured along with the other mercenaries and crew, shamelessly sold them out to the pirates. Alone wore an incredulous expression. That bastard. Evan, though seething with anger, could only grit his teeth and glare. Despite the situation, Alone didn't feel overly threatened. After all, Alone's magic required time for chance and seals, so he had allowed himself to be captured on purpose. Furthermore, as expected, Pina, still weakened by seasickness, had already broken free from the mana shackles set by the pirates and was watching Alone. It was clear that she was waiting for Alone to make the first move. Should I go for it? Just as Alone was about to speak the chant he had been considering. You're damn noisy. A man emerged from the pirate ship, which was anchored with hooks. He wore an elaborate suit of silver armor and carried a blue trident, exuding an air of elegance that was quite unlike a pirate. As he approached the captain with a relaxed expression. The Sea King. The captain's face turned pale as he uttered the man's title in shock. Pina, who had just woken up from her faint, quickly assessed the situation, and her expression twisted in anxiety. Having done her preliminary research before arriving, Pina knew exactly who the Sea King was. The Pirate King. A ruler who had unified 6 of the 7 archipelagos and was called the Great Pirate, one of the most wanted men in Raxas. Seeing the situation take a turn for the worse, she gritted her teeth. What on earth is going on? While Pina anxiously observed Alone's passive behavior, wondering what he was planning, the Sea King spoke. There's no way there's a noble here. The man seemed utterly disinterested in such matters as he looked at the captain. Why yes, over there, over there. The captain stuttered as he pointed toward Alone. The Sea King's eyes naturally followed his gesture and landed on Alone. Who? A moment of silence passed, followed by a look of surprise on the Sea King's face. And then? Be brother? The man known as both the Sea King and the Pirate King, Raiden, called out to Alone in shock. All eyes, including Phineas, turned toward Alone. Chapter 77. Among the pirates of the 7 archipelagos, all but one were unified under the title of the Pirate King. This person was famous for sinking over 50 pirate ships single-handedly and destroying one of the strongest pirate crews of the 7 archipelagos, known as the Black Tooth, earning the title of Sea King. Everyone here knew of the legend of Raiden. It meant that there was no one unaware of his reputation. Raiden was known for tearing apart the captains of the 7 archipelagos with his bare hands, massacring pirates with a grin filled with madness, which earned him the nickname the Demon. He was a wicked man who, as the phrase supreme and self-reliant suggested, easily killed according to his whims. Hence, Big Brother. The words that came from Raiden's mouth were enough to draw everyone's attention. Even the pirates who had always stood by Raiden's side, the workers of the merchant ship who knew Raiden's reputation, and even Pina, who had been wearing an anxious expression just moments ago, all eyes were on Alone. As Alone looked back at the white-haired, white-eyed man for a moment, he spoke. Raiden. Upon hearing this, Raiden's lips curved into a smile. No, Big Brother, what are you doing here? The pirates, who had been dumbfounded at the sound of Raiden naturally calling someone Big Brother, were stunned. Among them, Drake, who had been with Raiden since he dealt with the first pirate of the 7 archipelagos, was so shocked that his mouth fell open and his eyes seemed ready to pop out. It was because he had never seen his boss, Raiden, act so familiarly with anyone before. What is this? Before he could recover from his confusion, he saw Raiden swinging his spear to cut Alone's ropes. Pina, too, couldn't comprehend what was happening. She knew the stories about the man well. Who in the world is this person? Pina realized again that Alone, who seemed to be on familiar terms with the walking catastrophe of Raxas, Raiden, was not an ordinary individual. As for Alone himself, this guy is Raiden. He was greatly surprised. Based on the information Evan had shared earlier, he had suspected that the white hair and eyes might belong to Raiden, but he hadn't truly believed it. Unlike the other 5 sins, Raiden never had any illustrations of his normal appearance. After becoming one of the 5 sins, he was only remembered through monstrous illustrations, except for the peculiar detail that his hair and eyes were white. I was just passing through on my way to handle some matters in Raxas. You could have at least sent word if you were coming. I did consider meeting you if possible, but I didn't expect this encounter. Let's go together. Ah, Evan, it's been a while. It's been a while. Alone, who was exchanging light greetings with a warm smile, glanced at Raiden, who raised a hand to the pale-faced Evan. Are these people all with you, Big Brother? Yes. As soon as Alone confirmed, Raiden swiftly cut Pina and Felin's ropes with his trident. Let's go. With a smile, he began to guide Alone but then suddenly turned his gaze toward the captain, who still seemed unable to believe the situation. Oh, right. What did you say again? Raiden muttered in a low voice. You said you were going to betray my brother, didn't you? His voice wasn't loud, but it wasn't soft either. Raiden's voice rang out clearly, and it was only then that the captain realized the gravity of what he had done. Ah. He let out a faint gasp. His face quickly became consumed with fear as he tried to say something, but unfortunately, he never got the chance. Just as he opened his mouth to speak. Thud! Raiden's trident was already lodged in his throat. AR! The captain's eyes widened in disbelief as he stared at the trident impaling his neck, blood gushing from his mouth. Goo! The trident was drenched in blood. Trembling hands reached out to grasp Raiden, but Raiden maintained the same smile he had worn while looking at Alone. Then, swoosh! Raiden's eyes gleamed with sinister intent as he mercilessly severed the captain's neck. With a dull thud, the captain's body collapsed onto the deck. "Shall we go, big brother?" With blood splattered across his armor and face, Raiden spoke with a smile. Meanwhile, Alone, who had seen plenty of deaths before, felt a chill upon witnessing the ominous bloodlust in Raiden's eyes. Could it be that he's already awakened as one of the 5 sins? Recalling that Raiden was one of the 5 sins, Alone showed a hint of caution beneath his otherwise stoic expression. Alone left the merchant ship bound for Raxus and instead set his course toward the 7 archipelagos. In just half a day, he arrived in the region ruled by Raiden. "I'm alive." Evan, who had been crawling across the deck as if he were about to die, grinned with relief as soon as he set foot on solid ground. "This is the 7 archipelagos." Penia muttered unconsciously upon reaching the massive island under Raiden's rule, while Phelan next to her let out a quiet sigh of amazement. Even Alone couldn't help but gasp upon setting foot on the island. The city before him didn't resemble a pirate's haven, it looked more like a well-organized territory. In fact, it seemed like a meticulously planned estate. The entire island was aligned with perfect symmetry, and while the houses varied in size and appearance, their angles were precise. This island couldn't have always been like this. Did he arrange it this way due to his obsessive nature? Just as Alone was recalling Raiden's severe obsessive tendencies. "Come inside, big brother." They reached Raiden's mansion, which was built on the island. It was as perfectly symmetrical as the surroundings, with each side mirroring the other exactly. While the others rested, Alone had a conversation with Raiden and learned a key piece of information. So, that merchant ship wasn't headed for Raxus. That's right. It was heading towards the Sea Wolves. The Sea Wolves? The ones in the 7 archipelagos. Yes. So, we were deceived. Correct. I originally went there to cut off that bastard supply line. Raiden shrugged. That was their supply line. Yes. Specifically, it was for human flesh. What? Human flesh. Alone frowned at those words. Despite the dark fantasy nature of Psychedelia's world, human flesh was a taboo even here, something Alone loathed. Hearing that word brought a certain keyword to mind. Are the Sea Wolves linked to the mermen by any chance? Raiden nodded, looking a bit surprised, and proceeded to explain. After listening for a while, Alone pieced together the situation. When you were in the process of conquering the 7 archipelagos, the Sea Wolves appeared, leading the mermen and beginning the fight. Is that correct? Yes, big brother. I still don't understand how they control those monsters, though. As Raiden nodded, Alone couldn't help but feel a headache coming on. While the exact connection between the Sea Wolves, the mermen, and human flesh was unclear, one word naturally popped into his mind. Outer God. Knowing that the mermen's pursuit of human flesh implied an attempt to summon an outer god, Alone asked bluntly. Are you planning to deal with the Sea Wolves? Of course, big brother. This is a chance for revenge that you yourself granted me. I've cut off their supply line, and I plan to end it in 3 days. Me? When? Alone thought to himself, confused. However, he knew it wasn't the time to press the matter, so he continued. Can I come along? You, big brother. I have questions for the leader of that pirate crew. Is that possible? Despite the mermen's appearance, if they could still stop the delivery of human flesh, the outer god might not be summoned. For Alone, who not only needed to awaken an artifact in Raxus but also descend to the deep sea to find the mermaid, this was a crucial opportunity to prevent the outer god's arrival. If the merman did manage to summon the outer god, it would spell certain doom for Raxus, and the 7 archipelagos wouldn't be safe either. To move quickly and ensure Raiden's safety, Alone deemed it best to deal with the mermen. Though Raiden had become a pirate by veering off course, Alone still held some paternal affection for him. Thus, as long as I'm the one to take the head, I don't mind, big brother. With Raiden's agreement, they continued to talk about various things, and Alone learned a surprisingly positive fact about Raiden. Come on, big brother, no matter how reckless I am, I don't kill people just because they upset me. Really? Of course. It's all about the situation at the time. I wouldn't have touched the guy I killed today if he hadn't mentioned you. I've heard you're called the demon, though. That's true, but that's only when I'm dealing with other pirates. Now, I finally get to take revenge. Raiden turned out to be quite different from the infamous first impression Alone had of him. Seeing him smile cheerfully, Alone let out a sigh of relief internally. He had been worried that Raiden might have become completely depraved, rendering all the support he'd given so far meaningless. When Alone first boarded Raiden's ship, he heard additional rumors from Penia and seriously worried that Raiden might have become one of the 5 sins. But the rumors seemed somewhat exaggerated. Piracy was not exactly honorable, and Raiden's behavior today was indeed a bit psychotic, but Alone found it within reason. After all, even the other 5 sins, though seemingly normal, had at least one unusual trait. Recalling this, Raiden suddenly remarked, "But you're surprisingly ordinary, big brother." "What do you mean?" "Well, people change rapidly after meeting you. I was curious, like, if you were using hypnosis magic tilde." "Hypnosis magic?" "I don't mean that literally, just that people change drastically, you know." "Do they?" "Yes, that's what I've heard." After chatting for a while, Alone shifted the topic. "Raiden, is it possible to go to Roxas? Are you planning to stop by Roxas?" "Yes, I have something to take care of." "What sort of business, big brother?" "I have someone to meet." As Alone said this, he thought of a man, Capresa Alexion. Unlike the artifacts found in dungeons, the ring obtained from Heinkel or the relics from the colony's treasury were special. Alone needed a skilled appraiser for these items, and the thought of this appraiser made him grimace. While it was true he had come this far specifically to meet Alexion, Alone didn't particularly want to see him. The reason was simple: Alexion was known to be extremely irritable and troublesome. In the game, he could be found in the slums of Roxas, setting his prices arbitrarily based on his mood, earning him a notorious reputation among players. His obnoxious dialogue whenever clicked often made players want to strangle him. Still, apart from Alexion, most artifact appraisers were rare special merchants found by luck in dungeons or labyrinths. That was why Alone had come all the way to Roxas. Thinking about the game makes me angry, but I have no choice. I'll just have to go along with it, even if I get some insults thrown my way. With that thought in mind. "Who are you going to meet, big brother?" "Appraiser Alexion." "Is he the only person you need to see?" "Yes. That's why I need to get to Roxas." When Alone mentioned this, Raiden paused for a moment, thinking quietly before replying. "Understood. Please rest for now, big brother." The response was a bit puzzling, but since Raiden was urging him to rest, Alone complied and went to sleep. The next day. "Big brother, I've brought him." On Raiden's left side, Alone saw appraiser Alexion trembling like a leaf, while Raiden flashed a cheerful smile. Please, spare me. I beg you." The man, who was known for his vicious temper, was now groveling, on the verge of tears, despite being a middle-aged adult. "Hey, did I kidnap you? I brought you here politely, didn't I?" "Why yes, you brought me here very politely." "Really? Then why are you trembling?" "HNG." Alexion held his breath as Raiden spoke, leaving Alone momentarily speechless. 5 sins? He's not becoming one, right? The suspicion that had settled in his mind yesterday resurfaced again. Chapter 78. The last island of the 7 archipelagos, still unconquered by Raiden, is the territory of the pirate crew, Sea Wolves, on the 6th island. At the center of this island stands a massive wooden fortress. "So, you're saying we were attacked?" A man frowned deeply. A long vertical scar marked his face, and he wore a prosthetic leg embedded with jewels on his right leg. He was none other than Turtigan, the leader of the Sea Wolves and the man notorious for devastating one of Roxas's territories, earning the nickname the Destroyer. Yes, judging from the lack of communication, that seems to be the case. A male sailor, visibly anxious, glanced around nervously. Turtigan scowled and spoke up. "Then, who was it that attacked us?" "PSHHH. It seems to be that bastard, Raiden." It was unclear how long Turtigan remained silent after the sailor's report. "Hey." "Yes?" "Come here." "Come here, what?" "I said, come closer." Turtigan beckoned with his prosthetic hand, and the sailor, though hesitant, slowly approached, clearly uneasy. The next moment. Splat! The sailor's head burst open, having shown a nervous expression just moments before. Blood splattered, turning the office into chaos. The sailor's body, now headless, collapsed to the floor with a thud. Damn it! Bang! Crack! Smash! But it wasn't enough for Turtigan. He grabbed the headless corpse by the collar and punched it repeatedly. The head, except for the lower jaw, was crushed, the spot where the heart once was now bore a gaping hole, and the right arm fell off like a broken toy. Bam! Still not satisfied, he slammed the lifeless body into the ground, stomped on it several times, and then, after panting heavily, sat back down, leaving the grotesquely twisted corpse behind. Just then, the tightly closed office door opened, and a man entered. "Boss! Take this body away." The man nodded briefly and, upon gesturing with his head, other sailors started to drag the horribly mangled body out of the room. "How many more do we need?" "According to that man, we still need at least 1,500 more. TSK, after all the sacrifices we've already made, there's still that much left." "Yep." "No, that's too late. That bastard Raiden will be pushing through any time now." As Turtigan muttered in frustration, the man who had entered, the deputy leader Zelenka, hesitated before speaking. "Boss, won't it be fine anyway? We have those things, so we should be able to win if we fight at sea, right?" At Zelenka's words, Turtigan got up and moved toward the window outside the office. The wooden fortress came into view, and the corpse that had just been killed in Turtigan's outburst was being devoured, chomp chomp. Crunch, by grotesque creatures. From a distance, their overall form didn't seem much different from that of a human. However, their skin was different from that of humans, covered in green scales, and their faces resembled those of sea creatures. Above all, their pupils were purely black, as if painted over, empty and void of any emotion. This suggested that they were fundamentally different from humans, not just in appearance but in essence. Hundreds of mermen clung to a single corpse, like ravenous piranhas, their mouths smeared with dark red blood. Watching this, Turtigan thought, "Indeed, they are strong." He was well aware of the mermen's strength. While their effectiveness on land was uncertain, he was confident that, when battles were confined to the sea, the mermen alone could easily fend off Raiden's massive army. The real issue, however, was Raiden himself, a great pirate who unified the 6 archipelagos and the master of the White Moon. That bastard is a monster. Turtigan involuntarily frowned as he recalled a moment from the past. It was a time when he, along with the pirates of the 6 archipelagos, had launched a war to defeat Raiden and split one of the archipelagos among themselves, back when Raiden had only captured one island. It was a memory of Raiden moving freely underwater, tearing apart blessed captains with his bare hands, and sinking over a dozen ships single-handedly. It's still not enough. Because of this, Turtigan instinctively knew that even with the mermen, this upcoming battle would be insufficient. At the same time, a voice echoed in his mind, one that had come to him unexpectedly when he was awaiting his death at Raiden's hands, offering a way to kill Raiden. "Do you not wish to gain power?" The voice belonged to a man who promised the power to not only defeat Raiden but to become the ruler of the world. "Offer human flesh to the mermen. Continue to sacrifice, gather souls, earn their favor, and you will become a god." Turtigan picked up the object that the man had given him, a faintly teal artifact with protruding fangs on all sides. He stared at it intently, and as soon as the mermen finished devouring the corpse, a green light flowed directly into the artifact. After a moment of silence, he spoke to Zelenka. "How many more did you say were needed?" "At least 1,500, Zelenka replied. Hearing this, Turtigan once again recalled the words of the man cloaked in black. "Do you not wish to gain power?" As he considered the man's words again, Turtigan muttered quietly, "Perhaps there's a way." He stared silently at the fortress for a while longer. A way, indeed. Turtigan's eyes, now looking outward, held a faint trace of madness, a green glimmer of insanity. The appraiser Alexion is someone alone would rather avoid meeting unless it involved an artifact. First, because Alection's twisted personality would inevitably stir up Alone's killing intent. Second, because Alexion funded underground factions in Raxa's slums, making him a difficult man to meet. Thus, Alone had come prepared for the encounter, expecting both difficulty in meeting Alexion and inevitable frustration once they did. However, clink. Roll roll roll. SS sorry. Alexion, who had been handed Heinkel's ring and a small sword for appraisal, dropped that insignia of the Blind One's contract in his trembling hands, scrambling to pick it up. Alone wore a peculiar expression. Alection's appearance matched the illustration from the game, but his behavior was completely different. Of course, Alone understood the reason for this change. He discreetly glanced at Raiden, who stood watching calmly with an innocent smile. As Alexion, still trembling, struggled to start appraising the artifacts, Alone thought. I only brought him here respectfully without doing anything. Judging by Alection's reaction, that hardly seemed to be the case. Alone continued to wear a strange expression until Alexion finally spoke up. It's done. Already? Alexion, who had appraised the artifacts in less than 10 minutes, surprised Alone, as he knew it normally took at least 2 hours. Yes. Alexion bowed his head repeatedly as he returned the 2 artifacts to Alone. It's real. Alone, upon receiving the artifacts, confirmed that the appraisals were indeed complete, as indicated by the now vivid colors of the once dull grey artifacts. Heinkel's ring had turned from grey to red, and the treasure acquired from the colony's vault had a deep, clear sheen. You're fast, Alone remarked. You didn't just rush through it, did you? No. Absolutely not. Alection's nervous response to Raiden's question, along with his trembling hands, made Alone feel a bit of pity. The appraisal is complete. Is that so, brother? Yes, let him go, Alone said. At that, Raiden nodded and gave a simple order. Hey, take him away. The pirates, who had been waiting for this command, quickly entered and started escorting Alexion out. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for sparing me. Alexion exclaimed, tears welling up in his eyes, as if he was escaping from hell itself. Brother, are we really done here? Alone asked. Yes, thanks to this, there's no need to go to Raxas. That's a relief, brother, Raiden replied with a laugh. Alone, seated opposite him, asked a question. By the way, are you sure you really brought him here politely? Of course. I really did bring him politely. It's probably just my reputation that scared him. Maybe he was just overwhelmed by his infamy. After pondering Raiden's response for a moment, Alone decided to accept it and asked another question that piqued his curiosity. How did you find Alexion in just 1 day? Considering how well hidden he must have been, it should have been nearly impossible without dismantling the entire underworld network. Ah, those guys. Yeah. So you did meet them, right? Well, I did meet them, but we didn't exactly have a conversation. If you didn't talk, how did you find him? You did bring Alexion here politely, right? Alexion was brought here politely, brother, Raiden replied with a sly grin after a brief pause. Alone, instinctively understanding how Raiden had brought Alexion, felt a chill run down his spine. The 5 great sins, that's still not complete, right? He resolved to keep a closer eye on Raiden. While Alone was reflecting on these thoughts at the archipelago, in the southern estate of the Mayon territory, located in the Duchy of Drua near the southern border with Caliban, events were unfolding. This estate was the headquarters of Pigul, an organization that expanded its influence by trafficking human flesh and drugs, operating from Drua. Just a short while earlier. Please spare me. Dart, the leader of Pigul, who had processed thousands of people into drugs without shedding a tear, was now trembling with fear, his eyes filled with terror and tears. I was only following orders. Please, have mercy. He struggled desperately to survive. But... crack! In an instant, his entire body twisted unnaturally, ensnared by purple threads, and blood gushed out as he met his end. The man who silently watched the corpse collapse to the floor then shifted his gaze to the window, from where the entire estate was visible. Corpses littered the grounds, bodies split in half, some embedded in the estate walls, and others who died with eyes wide open in terror. There were bodies everywhere. Yet the man, who observed the gruesome scene without a hint of emotion, was no ordinary person, he was Deus. Have you found anything? Deus asked in an empty room. Soon, a man appeared from the shadows behind him. Haydn. At Deus's call, Haydn bowed slightly. As reported earlier, this doesn't seem to be the headquarters of the directive. The higher-ups. Yuna is gathering information, but the command chain is complex, likely to avoid detection, so it's taking some time. I see. However, we have identified the nobles who orchestrated this. Who are they? They are nobles from Asteria. Deus fell silent for a moment. Haydn, you've made information gathering very convenient. It's nothing. Yuna also believes it's for the Great Moon, as does the entire Blue Moon. I see. Deus continued. What are the names of these nobles? It seems to include Count Barthes and Count Brielle, along with 2 others. What do you plan to do? In my opinion, eliminating just the 2 main perpetrators should serve as a warning and prevent further incidents. Kill them all. Without a hint of hesitation. I am not merciful enough to spare those who tried to harm the great moon. His eyes gleamed ominously. So, kill them all. Leave no one alive. He muttered the chilling words in a low tone, eyes filled with madness. All for the great moon. With that, the 2 figures signaled the end of Piguel's downfall and vanished. Another organization had been erased from history.